Hey guys, welcome back. It has been a while since I made my last video about adding Java and Maven framework to existing or new projects. And if you remember, at the end of the video, I said, now it's only logical that we just go ahead and write some tests to our test framework, right? So in this video, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about two of the very famous test libraries that are out there. For example, TestNG and JUnit, and we're going to pick one of them. And once you pick one of them, we will add it as a dependency on our project, and we will write some very basic tests using that library. So let's just go ahead, go back to internet, and let's search for this simple thing, TestNG versus JUnit, and you will get a bunch of articles which will tell you about difference between JUnit and TestNG. One of the things which is common between all these articles is they will tell you that TestNG is better than JUnit, which probably was true when maybe JUnit 4 was in existence, but it's no longer true anymore after JUnit 5 was released. For example, if you look at this table, it says JUnit does not support to run parallel test. If you open JUnit 5 documentation, you can see that this is not true anymore. JUnit 5 supports parallel execution. And even though it says parallel test execution is an experimental feature, I have been using it for nearly 2 years now, and I can tell you it's very stable. There's no problem in it. Then, for example, it says it does not support advanced annotations. Also not true. And for example, if I search annotations, you have like tons of annotations, and you even have meta annotations. So again, this is not true. Maybe it was true with JUnit 4, but it is not true anymore. The dependency tests are missing in JUnit. Again, not true. If you go back and look into, for example, test execution order, you can have any sort of order that you want. So again, not true. Grouping tests together is not possible in JUnit. Again, not true. If I just do a @tag, you will see that you can group your test cases based on any of the tags that you define. Ease of use, for example, it says running tests need a certain dependency on JUnit. Well, I think it does not matter. If you run tests in JUnit or TestNG, both need to have certain dependency. And it says writing tests and configuring them is easy in TestNG than JUnit. I'm not sure if it's a valid statement. This looks more like, I don't know, but this is not true. Like writing tests in both of them is very easy. I think what I'm trying to say is, I'm not trying to say that this article is incorrect. What I'm trying to say is, maybe when this article was written, which was long back, maybe it was true, but it's not true anymore. And it's not just this article. I think if you open any article, more or less all these articles will tell you exactly the same thing. This is more of a recent one, but for example, if you go and pick up any of the articles, I think they more or less say the same thing. So it's not about that, that particular article is incorrect. For example, look at this one. It says no parallel execution. Parallel execution is not available in JUnit. So all these articles are pretty outdated. And in the past, I started writing my test using TestNG, and then I moved to writing tests into JUnit. And I found writing tests in JUnit is much more smoother, much more easier compared to TestNG. So what I'm trying to say is, if you are used to using TestNG, try to give it a shot using JUnit 5. Maybe you'll like it, maybe you'll not, but it's still worth giving it a shot, right? And like one last thing is, I can imagine why so many people are using TestNG, because, well, I can imagine most of the new people do this kind of research, and since all the article says that TestNG is better than JUnit, they go on, they keep following the same trend. And even though at the current time, JUnit 5 is much more advanced than TestNG, but people still keep using TestNG because, well, that's what most of the article says, right? So without spending any more time into this, now since we already know that we want to go ahead with JUnit, let's just add some project dependencies and write some tests using JUnit 5. So I think what you can do is, to add a JUnit dependency, you can just say JUnit 5 maven dependency. And there are some articles that can tell you how to do it. For example, if you click on this, this article tells you that if you add all these dependencies for API, to get all the annotations, engine to get runtime on which all this test will run, parameters to support parameterized test, suit to use suit feature. So it tells you, like how you can add all those dependencies and run your test. But I think I can even show you an easier way of doing it rather than all these dependencies. So for example, if you go to maven repository, not to engine, let's go to JUnit. Let's click on org JUnit Jupyter API. And here you can see, again, you see API, engine, parameters, but let's just click on aggregator. Let's go to the latest version, 5.8.2, and let's copy this. Let's copy this dependency. Let's go back. And to add a dependency, so this is a dependency that you want to add to your project, right? So project dependencies are added inside something called dependencies. And if you just add it here, you have your dependency available now in your project. And if you're adding this dependency for the first time, you will see this version showing as red. And what you have to do is right click on this, click on maven, and if you do reload project, it will download all the dependencies, and this version will no longer be red and it will become black. Another thing what I like to do is, I don't like to keep all these versions here in version, but I like to add them as properties. So for example, if I call it as JUnit Jupyter version, now I can put this version here, and if I give a dollar bracket JUnit Jupyter version, now I can have a look, like I can have a quick look at all the dependencies that I'm maintaining in my properties file, right? So once you do this, you actually have got all the needed dependencies. If you scroll down, you can see this dependency contains both API, parameters, Jupyter engine. It contains a managed dependency, and it has got pretty much everything that we need to start writing our test cases. So let's just go ahead and write some test cases. If I now go to my test folder, one of the things which I like to do is, as a first thing, I always like to add a sandbox test class. So for example, if I go to Java and if I say test sandbox, this is a class where I experiment with certain things. So now I can say test sandbox, and let's write a very basic test, and let's call it as white, and let's call it as assert that true is true. It's more like a very simple Boolean test, and what I'm going to do is assert true, and I'm going to call it true, and probably write a message which is true is true, right? And now IntelliJ is asking you to import this method, import the static method. So now I imported my static method here. Maybe one more thing which I want to briefly touch upon is, in general, I always like to have whenever I'm importing static methods, I like to have class.method name, but assertions are the only exception where I don't mention the class name, because we know that we're using JUnit, and then it's just implied that it's coming from JUnit. So that's our first test. I still cannot run it. So if I do @test, I should be able to now run this test. And let's see. The test ran, and well, it's very simple. Let's add just two more tests, very simple test, and let's call that assert that. And now this time let's have an assert equals test, and let's call it assert that a day is a day, right? And let's call it assert equals, and I will call it a day, and this is message. So let's just have another one, and I can call this as a day, right? So now this is an assert true, this is an assert equal test, and let's just run this. Runs fine, no problem. And before I wind up this video, let me just quickly go and show that in JUnit you can actually have tons of kind of test cases. So for example, if I go to parameterized test, so you have repeated test, parameterized test, templates, dynamic test, a lot of stuff. But we can cover all these different kind of tests in a separate video, because otherwise this video will get very lengthy, and the goal of this video was only to show that in a core test framework setup, if you have this dependency added, you can write tests for any kind of automation framework. May it be a REST API framework, may it be a browser automation, may it be a mobile automation, may it be a message broker automation, it does not matter, right? So we just want to show that with this, you should be able to write tests. So for now, let's just add these tests to GitHub, and then we can wind up this video. So if I go to terminal code, okay, so this should have been avoided. Let's add our sandbox class. Let's add this. Let's add the POM file. Very good. In fact, I should do it one by one. Added test sandbox class. Oh, I'm on the main branch. Git branch. Git checkout branch. And let's call it as add JUnit 5. In fact, branch feature add JUnit 5 tests. Let's just add JUnit 5 git branch. Okay, now I'm on this branch. Let's add the sandbox class. Let's add the POM file. Add a POM file. Let's add the README file. This, I think these are just updates from the last video. And we're not going to add the target class. And in fact, updated README file. And for now, let's just push it. Git push. Let's in fact ignore this class from target. Let's go back. Let's go to our git ignore file, and let's ignore target directory. Let's call it target. If you go back, it should be gone. So the target file is gone, and we can say ignore target repository. Check in, and okay, permission denied to promote. Okay, so now I'm on my company account, and that's why it's giving me this complaint. So what I'm going to do is, this is something which is outside the scope of this video. So for now, I would just pause this video because it helps meet us both our goals. Number one was to talk about two famous test libraries, pick a test libraries. So we added a test library and we saw some very basic tests, right? And maybe in the next video, what we can see is, if I try to run this test, so it ran both of them in parallel, which is a little bit weird because we've not yet added parallel capabilities. But I think let's see another thing. If I try to do a maven clean test at this moment, it will not allow us to run those tests. So for example, you see that the tests are not run because we are missing some dependencies that we need to run our test from a command line. And if we want to run our test into CI, we will not have any IntelliJ available. So then we would need to have the dependency or that capability to be able to run a test from command line. So probably that is something that we will cover in our next video. So I hope you learned something new in this video. And if you like my video, please press the like button. If you want to subscribe, I'll be happy to see that. And I will look forward to see you in another video. See you. Cheers. Bye-bye.